So this is the island, and most of the activity is on the south of the island. When you see this coral reef, which is the reason for building a lighthouse. So this is what you discover when you arrive in New Caledonia. The fact that now the business of the lighthouse is ruled by a private company, who is a private contractor, not for the lighthouse, but for the island itself. They have a contract with the government to maintain the environment of the island, which is a coral reef island that we will see later. 20,000 people a year can reach the island. It's a day trip, very expensive, which include not only the visit of the lighthouse, but also food, a spectacle of dance, shark feeding, glass boat, and ever. And the lighthouse visit is free. So it's important also to say that the lighthouse is the appealing thing for the island. The people are going to this island, not another sand or coral island. Could be closer to the Numia port. The lighthouse is an icon for the country, which is very important. You see it everywhere in the plane when you arrive, on buses, as you say. So that's where you can get your ticket in Numia, which is the capital city. And you meet with the people on Numia port. And you see the island, which is 10 miles away. So it's a speedboat to reach the island. This is this is the people watching the lighthouse, and this is what they can see. Well, and this is the entrance of the lighthouse. We can see that it was built in 1862 in Paris, and you also see that blue thing, which is very important because you can notice that it's still a lighthouse, and you need to clean your feet from the sand, which is a major issue for the preservation. So that's a small thing, is very important in the preservation process. Okay. And this is the door to some history. You cannot avoid that. So, New Caledonia became a French colony in 1853 because France didn't have any colony between New Zealand and Australia, and they were very upset that pieces of land became English. So they sent convicts to New Caledonia, as Australia did, England did in Australia 55 years earlier. So it's a coral, there is a coral reef, and there is a loss of numerous boats as soon as it became a colony. And of course the local mariners asked for a maritime safety plan, which includes nautical charts that didn't exist, pilots, and of course lighthouse and beacons. So the French Lighthouse Commission, established in 1811, which means that they will celebrate 200 years next year, decided for a 45 meters steel tower. And the architect of this was Mr. Reynaud, which is one of our finest architects and engineers, who was responsible for most lighthouse building in France between 1840 and 1880. He was famous from his first, which is the Eau de Bréa, which is a sea lighthouse based on the Scottish and English experience of sea lighthouse. So he decided to design that strange structure with iron plates, which is also a pre-built lighthouse, which means that it took less than a year to rebuild it on the island. The lighthouse was built in Paris, so it's a Paris product of the Industrial Revolution, and it was also exhibited in Paris, and the lighthouse, steel lighthouse, became a very big attraction in Paris capital city. What is interesting also for us is that this lighthouse, which is for me one of the milestones in the lighthouse architecture history, became very soon a place to visit. We have evidence of party of people getting to the lighthouse since the very beginning of the lighthouse itself. So that's very important, because if we come back to the present, the tourists are important character in the history. So let's take a look upstairs. You see the classical trouble with birds. We have also a sea eagle who is on the roof. Well, that's the structure with the lion head, which is very typical of the French lighthouse. And this is the view when you can see all the facilities for the people keeping the island, who are now paid by this private contractor for the island. You also have the facilities for the lighthouse people, and you have an agreement to share energy produced by solar panels between the company and the lighthouse authority. Well, what can we... Oh, this is what you do when you get back. This is a post-colonial visit, actually, because you have everything is based on the Pacific fantasy, which has nothing to do with the history of New Caledonia. Well, people are living, so we are living the island too. So what can we learn from that visit in the present, which is very interesting for an historian? Well, the first lesson is that the lighthouse use, the alternative use, is definitely not the issue in Amédée Lighthouse. At least it's not enough to secure a heritage project, because you can see that the lighthouse visit is part of a package in a cultural product, and also in a project of preservation of nature. It means that you cannot think of the lighthouse and the use of the lighthouse without the complex environment of an island lighthouse, which is very different from urban lighthouse like the Macquarie we saw in the presentation before. The second lesson is that in the case of island lighthouse, and we have the Cordouan lighthouse in the history of Gironde, which is now turned into a contract with the local authority, the day trip company has the control of the business from the mainland, and they are the key actor of the preservation project. In Cordon, we have 3 or 4 small day trip companies fighting to put the people close to the lighthouse, but they are not involved in the process, the whole process as it is in Nouméa. So try to say to the local authority that alternative use, whatever it could be, has no sense if you don't address the issue of transport, which is very complicated, of course, for that kind of island very far from the mainland. So you need a torchbearer, which is not the administration, because we are not responsible to transport the tourists. And the third lesson is that, as you may see, tourists will save the lighthouse in the future. And they are a forgotten character of the history of lighthouse. We all know Fresnel, great engineers, lighthouse keepers. But the tourist is the unknown character of the history of lighthouse since the 19th century. And that's what I'm trying to, as a historian, to do as a work. In the case of Cordon, for instance, to establish the history of the visit since the 17th century. Because, and it will be my conclusion, without history, there is no heritage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vincent. Your point of view about the lighthouses preservation is always interesting for us. And our next speaker is Mr. Carlos Ortigoza. The Captain Carlos Ortigoza from Venezuela Navy is Operation Chief of Hydrographic and Navigation National Service. Captain Ortigoza has occupied all the charge foreseen for your specialty on board, especially Chief of Venezuelan Ace Navigation Systems on direction of Hydrographic and Navigation, Chief of Project Division of Hydrographic and Navigation Office, Second Commander and Commander of the Oceanographic Vessel Punta Brava. He was invited to expose the project Venezuelan Modular Lighthouses during the last IALA conference in Shanghai. Unfortunately, he couldn't represent be there for motives of major force happening in Venezuela. This moment, the Venezuela Tourism Ministry studies the project to consider the substitution of some lighthouses that will serve simultaneously to increase the tourist offer. The title of his presentation is Venezuelan Modular Lighthouses. This presentation will be conducted in Spanish.